Hello, I'm Brian Hubbard.
And I'm Lynne McTaggart.
And we are What Doctors Don't Tell You. Can you believe this is our fourth podcast? You think public demand would have ended at number one, but here we are, four along the way. So what we do every week is we talk about health news and which seems to be of particular interest. And this is just a small portion of the work that we do. I mean, we are primarily a magazine, comes out every month. We publish, print, distribute simultaneously in America and in the UK. And the magazine can be found in America, in Barnes & Nobles, Whole Foods and all sorts of places. And in the UK, in places like Sainsbury's and Tesco's and Asda's and what you will. But the smart people subscribe. And so they get their magazine delivered nice and early, straight to their front door. And you can find out more about us from our website, which is wddty.com. And it's twice won the accolade of world's best health website. So well worth checking out if you haven't. So without further ado, let's begin with the health news of the week. First item, heart disease, heart attacks. Still the major killer in the West, number one killer still. And it's mainly characterized by a condition, a process rather, known as atherosclerosis, where the arteries begin to harden because of a build-up of a fatty deposit known as LDL cholesterol, low-density lipoprotein cholesterol, and eventually the build-up is such that the artery becomes blocked or occluded, as the docs like to say, at which point a heart attack happens. And that happens because it's starved of oxygen. Now, round about a third of all heart attacks are fatal. The person dies within moments, which means an awful lot aren't. And in those cases, they reckon if you can get to the hospital within an hour or so, the cardiologist will perform a stent on the artery, unblock it, and free the flow of blood back to the heart organ. So that's the textbook stuff. So let's get on to some interesting things we've discovered about heart disease, which seem to go against that. So the study has just come out which has found that up to half of people who survive a heart attack never even knew they had one, which is quite astonishing, and that which means that they never had any treatment, that they carried on with their lives. And when they compared them to people who knew they'd had a heart attack, obviously who survived it, they were diagnosed with a heart attack, and they were given statins and all sorts of drugs, both were still alive 10 years later. So it didn't seem to matter whether or not they'd been treated. How did they discover this? Well, what happened was a team of researchers were at a care home, and they were just testing the heart health of the occupants, and found that half of those had suffered a heart attack and never ever knew it. Isn't that astonishing? So there was damage had been caused to the heart, so the heart attack had occurred. They never knew, they didn't have any of the usual symptoms, which is tightness of the chest or the sort of classic severe pains down the left arm. None of that happened, and they just carried on with their lives, and they were absolutely fine. And a second study that came out in relation to this was that people who go to hospital at a time when the leading cardiologist is away at a conference are more likely to survive than those who were unlucky enough to have the cardiologist present who did all the stenting. They were less likely to be alive 30 days later. So again, fascinatingly, the less seems to be more, and people are surviving without this treatment. So what do you make of that, Lynn?
Well, I'm not surprised. I mean, we've done a lot of work on heart disease, not surprisingly, as it is the number one killer. And we found that there is a vast problem with the way we approach heart disease. Everything from still not understanding the causes of it, blaming it on high-fat diets, blaming it on fat, when there's no good evidence demonstrating that fats are the problem. In fact, fats are not a problem. Fats are really essential. And it looks like from increasing evidence that the real problem is processed food, is high sugar diets, essentially. So doctors don't really know why heart attacks occur, give people the wrong kinds of diets, but also of the wrong kinds of treatments. I mean, when you start looking at all of the treatments on offer for heart disease, it's no wonder that people survive better when they're not given these kinds of treatments, when the main doctor's away. I mean, just look at bypass surgery. You know, bypass surgery, which was considered great miracle surgery, you know, they have a name in medicine for patients who get bypass surgery, and they call them cabbages, which is an acronym for bypass surgery, but and its official name. But they might as well be describing some of the patients, because they suffer all kinds of things afterward, from stroke, a number die on the table, a number have gut problems afterward. And, you know, maybe we lose about 1/5 of the patients just with that procedure. Now, angioplasty came along, and that was supposed to be the miracle, less invasive alternative. In that situation, a tiny little balloon gets put in your blocked artery, and it gets pumped out, and the fatty tissue, the cholesterol, gets pushed against the arterial wall. And then because that usually goes back very quickly, they realized, well, we better create something to keep it there. So they created the stent, which is like a little scaffolding that is flat packed and then put into your artery, and then pushed out, so that it is like a little scaffolding to hold that artery's fat against the walls. There are all kinds of problems with angioplasty. There's not very much difference in mortality rates, for instance, between angioplasty and bypass surgery. And with stents, I mean, they've had all kinds of problems with stent designs, collapsing, finding that there's not a big difference. So then they created stents that had a drip feed system, and that was causing all kinds of problems. So it's not surprising why this stuff is still used when you actually follow the money, sadly. Stents every stent costs $15,000 in the States. Doctors who perform this kind of stuff routinely make about $500,000 on stents alone. And of course, you've got the whole drug industry, Brian, which is founded on a lot of other dubious medicine, like statins and dubious studies, demonstrating not terrific survival numbers.
And anyone who listened to the previous podcast number 3, would have heard that a study again had demonstrated that the stents had no benefit over doing nothing, which was an incredible blow for cardiologists, because that's what they do. And that's a major issue, which I don't know what's going to happen with it, because it was such a big and important study. Whether everyone's going to actually redress how heart surgeons operate, I don't know what's going to happen with that. But also the other thing to say, LDL cholesterol, forever fingered as the bad guy, well, of course, becomes increasingly important as you get older. Once you reach the age of 50 or so, LDL cholesterol actually helps to keep brain health going. It's very important for brain health. And it isn't really that surprising that when someone over the age of 60, 65 is put on a statin, which is designed to lower LDL cholesterol, that we also see a rise in dementia and Alzheimer's. I mean, you could say it's coincidental, but equally there could be a correlation there that, you know, we're seeing this all the time. And so I think it's just we don't really have the full story about heart disease. And it's just one last thing I just quickly want to say is that with stroke, for example, which I suppose you could argue is a heart attack of the brain, you know, the coronary arteries will create their own bypass and bypass the blocked artery. I mean, it's quite extraordinary.
Well, and I think that's why we're seeing very good survival rates with people who do nothing. The only point I'd make, though, is you don't have to do nothing. I mean, a heart attack is really a wake-up call saying something in your lifestyle isn't working for you. And there's so much evidence that a healthier diet, a lower sugar diet, a natural foods, Mediterranean-type diet, and all kinds of alternative remedies have a better track record than what's on offer from modern medicine. I mean, we covered it in this book on heart disease. We do some books as well on heart disease and arthritis, and we covered all of the alternatives and their better track records. This is what it looks like in the UK. So if you do have heart disease, before you rush to your doctor, I would just say do your homework and see what the real statistics are about survival and better alternatives.